Hey siblings in Christ, my name is Novella and I am the host of Bootstrap Journey. If you enjoy this content, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share so that I can continue to produce content that helps you to find balance, healing, and wholeness from a Christ-centered perspective. I'm calling today's video Shadows of Giants because, as you know, my mother had borderline personality disorder and she was also an addict. So she had a lot of narcissistic tendencies. And anyone who's ever encountered a narcissist, you know that they tend to be the giant, this huge looming figure in your life, and you're just in the shadow, right? It's kind of like every day you're just living with Goliath, hoping that they don't squish you like a bug. So, obviously, I lived in fear of my mother, and she could be a terrible monster at times. And I'm not referring to the typical fear of like, oh, that stove's going to burn me, or I'm going to be late for work, or maybe I'm not going to have enough money to pay my bills. I'm referring to a crippling, life-altering fear that continues to grip me even to today. And because of that fear, I've battled so many insecurities and doubts over the years. I have been able to overcome and unravel a lot of them. I've been able, through the healing power of Jesus, to replace that mindset with the identity of Christ. But I'm still a work in progress. There's still many layers that need to be peeled back because I went through years, decades actually, of abuse and trauma. So that doesn't go away overnight. God has the power to completely heal us overnight, but I believe that he takes us through the healing journey as a process. Number one, so that we learn to trust him. And number two, so that we learn to give grace and empathy to others. Well, so like I said, my mother had borderline personality disorder. And if you don't know what that is, it doesn't mean that she had split personalities, but daggone sure felt like it sometimes, because she would go from being the most loving, supportive, complimentary person you could be around. She was the life of the party. She was extremely charismatic, to a Jekyll and Hyde kind of thing. You know, like everybody loved being around her until they got to know her. Because once they got to know her, the mask came off and suddenly she was your enemy. And she felt like she always had to have an enemy. She always had to be angry at somebody. And if that anger wasn't pointed towards a specific person, well, they were relieved. So they typically didn't try to stop her from attacking the next person. I'm going to go deeper into that on another video because that does seem to be a narcissist thing. If you've ever heard the analogy flying monkeys, they like to surround themselves with people that they have either terrorized so much that they're afraid of them, or those people who are so enamored by them, by their charm, that they can't see the monstrous effects. But again, whole different topic, because today is focusing on something very specific, and you'll realize what I'm saying here soon. So she thrived off of other people fearing her. She actually told me that multiple times. Like if she was being physically abusive to me, there were a few times she would be hitting me with a belt, and I don't mean like spanking me. I mean, she would be hitting me across my back with the belt, and she would make sure that the belt buckle would cut across my back and it would break the skin, and I, have trails of blood coming down my back. And when she would draw back the belt, or if she was hitting me with a drop cord, or she had wire hangers, she would twist them together. And back in the day, people would call those pimp sticks in the hood. But my mom would twist them together, and that's how she'd reach me if I was too far away for her to hit me, and she didn't feel like running me down. And again, it would cut through my skin. She would throw lamps at me. She would throw, have you ever seen those big, thick beer mugs? She'd throw them joints at me. She didn't care. Whatever she had on hand. And there was a point in time where she would like buck at me and I'd flinch and she would laugh and she'd say, "So glad you still are afraid of me. I love that." She legit would say that to me. I mean, she probably wouldn't ever say that out in public, but in private, she definitely thrived off of it. She let us know that on a regular basis. It made her feel empowered. It made her feel like she had control over the person and the situation. And anytime she felt like she didn't have control, it was going to get ugly. And her tyranny ultimately led me to have a deep distrust of all authority figures. I didn't trust teachers. I definitely didn't trust DSS because they would show up to investigate her. Because multiple times people would call DSS when they would see the marks on me or, various behaviors from me. And DSS would always show up, and with my mother sitting in front of me or next to me, they would ask, "Does your mother hit you?" No, of course she doesn't. So things like that really caused me to not trust anyone in a position of authority. And part of it was because of the abuse my mom put me through. And then another layer came from her gaslighting me, the mental abuse that she would attach to other authority figures. She wanted to ensure that she was the ultimate control over my life, that no one else had any sort of authority that I would listen to. And in middle school, a counselor at school told my mother that in no uncertain terms, I had to start therapy or they would get the court involved. She abided. She took me to a few sessions, but she was very strategic and she ensured that I never opened up to that therapist. After the very first session, and if you've ever encountered therapy in your first session, it's not anything deep. It's them like laying the groundwork, kind of an introduction sort of thing. You really don't get into anything serious in the first session. And you talk about why you're there. So after the first session, my mother told me that the therapist had recorded the session and had allowed her to listen to it before we left. And then her and her husband at the time, I think it was her fourth husband, they mocked me over things that I didn't even say in the session. Like my mom was saying, "Yeah, I heard on the recording how you just felt like nobody understands you and life's so hard." And he's just cackling away. And he's like, "Yeah, life is just so hard for you." And I even said to them, I was like, "I never said that." And they were like, "Yes, you did. I heard it. I heard it on the recording." And even though they were relaying inaccurate information to me, my young, already traumatized brain did not consider that she was making that entire story up. I believed her. And I refused to talk to the therapist after that about anything significant. So about the third or fourth session, he was like, "I'm not getting anywhere, so there's really no point in us going forward." I talked to him about like homework and, stupid stuff. There were other instances where she would tell a medical doctor something really outlandish and they would believe her and they would treat me based off of what she told them. I had one time where I had a yeast infection and I was only like 12 or 13 years old. And she asked a nurse, "What causes a yeast infection?" And the nurse said, "Oh, well, that only happens if you have had sex and you wear tight jeans afterwards without taking a shower." And my mother looked at me and said, "I knew it. I knew that's what it was." And so she took me to the hospital and she demanded that they do a pelvic exam to see if I was still a virgin. And I was flipping out the entire time. I was like really terrified. I was losing it. I was a virgin. And come to find out later, that nurse, I mean, back then, I don't think they had as much information as they do now, but the nurse was wrong, obviously. In case you don't know, yeast infections can be caused by antibiotics, by certain kinds of soaps that have perfumes and dyes in it. Bubble baths are a big way that females can get those. And of course, we just didn't have that information back then, but it became this really horrific situation based off of my mother accusing me of something that just wasn't even legitimate. So by the time I was a teenager, I was 13 and I had became a cutter. And I'll in another video I'll tell you why I became a cutter. But she would lock me into mental institutions, and basically she would do that when she felt like she was losing her grip on me. If I was starting to pull away from her and kind of establish, I became very rebellious by that point in my life because I felt like I couldn't win. You know, I was getting beat on if I was doing wrong, and I was getting beat on if I was just minding my business, making straight A's, cleaning the house like I was supposed to, abiding by all the rules. I just couldn't win, you know? So I stopped caring at some point, and she would feel, and I started running away and stuff like that. So she felt like she was losing her grip and she would have me institutionalized. Well, unfortunately, they never questioned it. They never asked me anything. They automatically would go off of whatever she told them, and they would lock me in there for like a week or two. I think the longest incident was maybe 2 weeks. And the entire time they would have me there, they never actually applied any sort of legitimate treatment to resolve my cutting. They never did any type of therapy. They never attempted to find out why I was cutting. And I was told repeatedly by staff members that I was only cutting for attention. And at the time, I thought that was really weird for them to say that, because when I was an active cutter, I wore long sleeves all the time. And then when they kind of caught on, and it wasn't even my mother who realized, hey, she's wearing long sleeves in the middle of July. That's something's not right. My grandparents were the ones who caught it, and they confronted her about it. And that's how it was discovered. But it was never like I was cutting myself and rocking a wife beater so that everybody could see it. But once they caught on to I was wearing long sleeves, then I started cutting in other places that people couldn't see. So it baffled me that all of these staff members, these adults who were in a psychiatric field, were all just accusing me of an assumption without ever trying to find out what was actually going on. And from the moment that they would admit me, they would have me doped up on extremely powerful drugs like Haldol, Thorazine, and they didn't just have me take pills, they would inject me. After they admitted me, they would inject me to knock me out. And then I would stay doped up for maybe the first 3 or 4 days. I was almost comatose. I could not tell you my name. There were several times, like I vaguely remember at some point they had to put a placard on my door with my name on it, because I kept just going into random rooms thinking it was my room, and I would just lay down. And because I was not cognizant of what was going on around me. So it was really, really a horrible experience each time I went in. And to make matters worse, now I was 14 the first time she institutionalized me. They did not put me with the teenagers. I was not put with the youth. They put me in the adult wing every single time. Put me with the adult wing. So from the time I was 14 till I was 17, she had me in and out, back and forth into these mental institutions. And They said that the reason why they didn't put me with the youth is they didn't want the youth to get any ideas, bad ideas from me being a cutter. Now that I am actively involved in therapy, I realize that that facility just they were not equipped to handle anyone who actually had trauma or any type of neurodivergency and actually needed help. And it breaks my heart to know that other people had to experience that as well. The whole ordeal was terrifying and it was disempowering. It was just another layer of what you say doesn't matter. Your existence doesn't matter, pretty much. So after a culmination of all of the mental manipulation over the years, I never even thought of disagreeing with a doctor or changing my doctor. My mind had become so trained that I did not have a voice, that it continued well into my adulthood. And when I say well into my adulthood, I mean like I've only been speaking up for myself in the past maybe 5 years. And I was seeing the most awful, terrible doctor for years. I had the same lady, and I would tell her, like, I would have these issues with my hormones, or my cycle was drastically irregular, and I would ask her to test me for certain things, and she would refuse to, and she would tell me that I just needed birth control and that birth control would take care of it. And I would tell her repeatedly, I don't want to be on birth control. I don't want those chemicals in my body. And she would force me to be on it anyway. And I would listen to her because, like I said, I had been conditioned to do so. I had this subconscious belief that a person with any sort of power or authority, that they had control and that there was nothing that I could do. And then there were times that I would try to assert myself with her. She would become so aggressive and dismissive that I would shrink back. And many of my appointments with her would result in a panic attack. Like, seriously, I would have to go home and take medication to just get through the rest of the day. And people who know me personally would never think that I would be plagued with that sort of behavior or reaction. And if they saw me in that environment, they would truly be shocked, truly, because I'm a very assertive person, and I ain't scared to step to nobody. And part of that comes from, you get your tail beat your whole entire life. At some point, you like, what was her name? It wasn't Suge Avery. Harpo's wife. What was her name?
All my life I had to fight. I had to fight my daddy. I had to fight my uncles. I had to fight my brothers. Girl, child ain't safe in the family men's. But I ain't never thought I had to fight in my own house.
As an adult, like, that's the mindset I had. I wish somebody would at this point. Now, I wish you would. I'd rather have you kill me than ever put me back in one of those situations again. So people who interact with me on a regular basis, that's how they know me to be. It's like, I ain't taking none of this. I wish you would. So to see somebody trigger me like that, seriously, people would be shocked. And I've been seeing the same therapist now actively of my own accord for about 8 years. I've had the same lady, and she's very familiar with my story, with my trauma, on a level that no one else in my life ever has been. And I refuse to change therapists for that reason. Like, she knows. And at some point she asked me, why don't you just change doctors? What? I just stared at her because I was like, that never even occurred to me as an option. That's a thing? And so I did, I started searching out new doctors, but I was very, very cautious. I was very detailed in my search for a new doctor because I was determined, why change doctors if I'm going to end up in the same exact situation. So I made sure that I had someone different this time. And I finally switched at the beginning of this year, 2022. And my new doctor is the exact opposite of my last doctor. And having that experience with her has been so empowering and freeing. Like, I can't even explain to you how that feels. I was ready to cry after my first visit from relief, because she asked me in-depth questions about anything I was struggling with, anything that she talked to me about. She would stop and ask me if I had questions, and she is very detailed and informative, and anything she would suggest to me, she would tell me, you are in charge of your body and your health. I will make suggestions, but you are the one driving. What? What? What does that mean? And she asked me at some point, she said, I'm sorry, I can't find your vaccine records. And I said, I don't do vaccines. And she was like, oh, okay. And moved on. She didn't like try to strap me down to the bed and stick me with a bunch of needles. And y'all, it might sound silly to some of you, but seriously, it's just been phenomenal. And when she has to send me to a specialist for something, and I ask for something specific through that specialist and they deny it, I always ask them now, will you please put that in my chart? I need you to put that I asked for XYZ. I need you to put that you denied it and why. When you ask a doctor to put that in your chart, that often makes them pause, because now there's a track record of them refusing treatment. Now, if they have a legitimate reason, of course, there's a track record of that as well. But I never even thought to do that. My new doctor taught me that. So it's been eye-opening, truly. And being able to say no or ask for what I need, it's just made a huge difference in my life. I'm now seeing how many other people live in the way that I was living. And maybe they didn't have a narcissistic parent terrorizing them, but they still didn't realize that their voice is valid. I see people on social media, they'll make posts about how others aren't supportive of them, or, that they're not getting what they need from the people around them. And I'll ask them, have you asked for specific kind of support? Like, if you just need somebody to listen to you, have you asked specific people, hey, I just need an ear right now. I just need kind of a shoulder to cry on. I just need to vent. Can you hold that space for me? Have you asked them that? And usually they give me the same response that I gave my therapist, like, what? That's a thing? Yeah. No one can read our minds. We have to ask. And typically, what I've discovered is typically when you do ask, now not everyone is going to be able to do what you need them to do or be what you need them to be in whatever moment or capacity, but you'll figure out who you can ask and what each person can provide for you. And that's empowering too, to be able to ask instead of waiting like you're just sitting over there pouting in the corner and like, oh, nobody loves me and nobody pays me any attention. Well, have you thought about going up and saying, hey guys, I need a little extra attention today. I'm feeling a little sad, a little lonely. Have you thought about that? It works. You know how I know? I've been doing it. And I've also heard a lot of women tell horror stories of what they've experienced with crappy doctors. It is awful what women, and I'm not saying that men don't go through terrible stuff with doctors. I do, I do notice that men are less likely to go to doctors. But I can't speak to what a man experiences because I haven't heard men saying that they've had awful experiences. I have heard a tremendous amount of women express that they have had just awful experiences with doctors who just didn't care. They didn't want to listen to them. They wanted to be in control. Terrible. And when I give them the feedback about the options, about find a new doctor or ask your doctor to notate in your chart that they're refusing your treatment or they're refusing a test or they're refusing whatever, again, they respond the same way I did. That's the thing. We aren't taught to use our voice, to stand for ourselves. We're just all out here struggling to be adults and just bouncing off of each other because none of us were told that, hey, this is how you adult. No, we're just thrown out in the fray and like, hey, good luck to you, buddy. And the more you grow and heal, the more you become emotionally healthy, the more you'll become aware of how deeply unhealthy the vast majority of society is. And that realization is sad. It's frustrating. But as we change, we need to offer grace to others. Offer them grace by sharing these same methods, things that you've learned, things that have helped you feel supported and empowered, things that have helped you to finally feel like you're a little baby bit of an adult. Instead of looking down on them like, oh, there she goes again, crying in her socks, expecting everybody to know what she needs. Just offer her that very basic, logical explanation because they don't know what they don't know. And like Maya Angelou said, when you know better, you do better. Now, not everyone will do better, but at least equip them so that they have the option. At the very least, you're planting a seed. Maybe, hopefully, sometime in the future, they will utilize that information. And if they don't, you've done your part. So this has been, I feel like each video is kind of getting more deep into things that I've experienced, and that's heavy for me. It's often difficult for me to talk about, but I truly, truly hope that some of you are able to, I hope it resonates with you, and I hope that you're able to take the information that I give you and find healing, find wholeness and peace within that. And I hope that you start to experience joy in your life. If this has helped you, feel free to comment. I would love to hear from you, but definitely please hit that like button, share with others that you think might benefit from these videos, subscribe, and I would love to have your feedback. But most of all, guys, be kind to you.